understanding the different types of disabilities. A lot of us have heard so many things about disabilities, but we do not understand the types of disabilities we have or we see in our communities. So today, an able speaker will be letting us know about all of this so that we'll have better understanding on how to address persons with disabilities and what are those important equipment, those important materials they need, aid materials they need to as support. So my name is Patience Sabamu Eje, and I will be your anchor for this evening. So um our speaker is Mr. Theophilus Michael Odaudu, and I'll be taking out a moment to read out his amazing profile. Theophilus Odaudu is a Nigerian lawyer with expertise in human rights and democratization, with particular interest in disability rights. Presently, he works with the Disability Rights Fund as Program Manager, West Africa. He has at different points worked with the National Human Rights Commission and the Kogi State Ministry of Justice in Nigeria. Theophilus volunteers for several organizations advocating the rights of persons with disabilities and other marginalized groups, and sits on the board of several human rights organizations. He has over 10 years experience working with disability community in Nigeria. Theophilus has an LLM in human rights and democratization in Africa from the University of Pretoria, South Africa, and another from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria. He has published articles on disability rights and democratization. Theophilus is a 2016 Mandela Washington Fellow and studied public management at the Maxwell School for Citizenship and Public Affairs, Syracuse University, New York. Thank you so much, Mr. Theophilus, for creating out time for us this evening. We are so happy to have you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Patience. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. We are happy to have you all go with us on a journey to discussing disability. I would like to appreciate everyone who had taken their time to join this conversation, and also thanks to the Sterling Inclusive Education and Development Initiative for putting this together. The last few episodes of this conversation had attempted to look at disabilities in different forms or how they intersect in different environment, and I think it's been very enlightening. So again, thanks Patience and your team for turning the spotlight on disability, because I think it's a conversation that we need to always have, looking at where we are coming from, seeing the level of marginalization that persons with disabilities have faced, both globally and locally. So this is very good, and I would like to commend you and your team for all you are doing for the disability community. Yes, patients have said a lot about me, and I do not think I need to repeat those. I am glad to be here to lead this conversation. Like I call it a conversation, which means that I will be expecting inputs, comments, and contributions from those who are able to join and are listening to the discourse. So I've been told to talk about the different types of disabilities. And in doing this, I will talk about how to address persons with disabilities in terms of language, what to say or what not to say, and try to adduce reasons why one is preferred over the other. Would also be looking at how to interact with persons with disabilities of different categories, and also the type of assistance that some may need. I must say that this is not going to be an exhaustive conversation. We'll try our best to cover as much as possible and as much as we also understand, because again, disability itself affects people in different ways. And sometimes, for someone who does not have a lived experience, it may be difficult to also adequately cover or explain the needs of a particular disability or a particular individual. So, having said that, I will now say that persons with disabilities, like we know, are members of the society that we see on a daily basis. We have them in our communities, in our homes, in our churches, in our business, sometimes in our schools, and we see them around. So these are not strangers, and they are not strange human beings that are living elsewhere, that will talk about people that are far away. However, these persons find it difficult to interact with the society because of the different barriers that have been placed on their path. And that is what makes the disability visible. Without those barriers, the disability would be less visible, and it won't matter whether someone has a disability or not. And that is where the disability community is pushing towards a society that has zero barriers for disability, a society that adjusts and can accommodate. When you hear persons with disabilities, what comes to mind? For many people, the first thing you think about is the blind, persons with physical disability, that's persons on wheelchair or those using crutches, or the deaf. These are some of the common disabilities that we know, that we see around. But there's more to disability than these. Those who have uh, either sensory or mental difficulty interacting with the society are all classified as persons with disabilities. So we have those with invisible disabilities, a disability that you do not just see by looking at the person. Outside the sensory disability like deafness and blindness, which ordinarily you won't even see, well, we see there are people with psychosocial disability, those we call people with mental health conditions. These are also persons with disabilities, but are also marginalized, and their needs sometimes go unnoticed because their disability is not visible. And there are many of such. In the disability community, even little people, those commonly called the dwarfs, are part of the disability community because of the limitations that they face in trying to interact with the society. So, the where I'm headed is to say that there is no end really to a classification of disability or what constitutes a category of persons with disabilities. It is open ended, and this is because life throws different challenges at people at different points and in different ways. addressing persons with disabilities. Today, we discuss and we say persons with disabilities in our environment. That's here in Nigeria, I think in the US and some jurisdiction. I know that in Europe, it's okay to also call disabled persons. So whether persons with disabilities or disabled persons are acceptable terminologies depending on your environment. Some go by the people first or person first classification, while others feel that it doesn't matter if the disability comes first or the person. But the idea of the person first classification is that to show that persons with disabilities are first of all persons before their disability. So if you say this is a person with disability, you first of all identified him as a person before you look at the disability. This comes from the idea that most of the times the discrimination that persons with disabilities face stem from people seeing their disability rather than seeing them as people. You see their disability before you try to see their abilities, and that perpetuates a lot of discrimination. So it is felt that addressing them as persons first before the disability is more dignifying. However, in other clans, like I said, in Europe, to be specific, it is fine to call disabled persons. And here, the argument is that it is fine to be a person with disability. It is fine to have a disability. It is normal. Here, they want to normalize the conversation around disability, and that the term disability or to be disabled is not a negative term. It connotes no negativity, and it's something that we should embrace because, again, it defines who we are and it's not something we should run away from. So, either way, it is accepted. Previously, you heard terms like um, handicapped as referring to persons with disabilities. Some even call less privileged. And you hear some other funky terms or whatever that people try to use to be euphemistic to try not to hurt the feelings of persons with disabilities. That you call persons with special needs, different ways that you refer to people with disabilities. Sometimes these terms also lead to discrimination because it tends to set persons with disabilities apart and set a standard that tend to look at them as some sort of superhumans or special beings and all. But all people with disability want it to be treated like every other person, like normal human beings as part of the society, which is exactly what they are. And for some terms, it has become archaic. In English, there are a lot of terms that we use in the past that we don't use now. They term them archaic. Some have become archaic and some have grown to have other meanings than what they used to be. And so it is felt that it's not proper to refer to persons with disabilities. We'll look at more of those terms as we proceed. So a glaring way that people refer to a category of person with disability that is not acceptable, I'll be using examples to try to put the point forward. So when you look at the deaf or those in the deaf community, you often hear people say, yes, that man is deaf and dumb. Now, even in the Holy Scriptures, let's say in the Bible, for example, which is the book I am familiar with, that is the terminology that is being used to refer to the deaf. And it tend to say that, yes, this one cannot hear and cannot speak. But today we don't refer to them as deaf and dumb. We refer to them as deaf persons. This is because, yes, they are deaf and they communicate through sign language. Now, why don't we accept deaf and dumb? Like I say, some words have grown to have other meanings and do not really, they have some negative meanings that you should not associate with a person. So if I say to you, Patience, that guy is such a dumb person, what do you make of that statement? It simply shows that this guy is not intelligent. This guy is senseless. This guy is, put how we say it, is a mumu. That's a dumb person, isn't it? But is that what the deaf are? So when you refer to them as deaf and dumb, it gives more other meanings. And for that reason, because that other meaning is demeaning and dehumanizing, the deaf community wouldn't want to be so associated or so called. There is a debate around hearing impaired. This is also because the term impairment kind of have a medical background to it. And a lot of hearing impaired, visually impaired, um, these are some terms that are generally being used. And in the community, there is still an argument and a discussion on its acceptability. Well, you come to those with physical disability. And when I say physical disability, it means those with the disability you can see. You know, you hear people say we are talking with the physically challenged in referring to persons with disabilities in general. When you call people physically challenged, a blind person can tell you that he does not have a physical disability. The term physically challenged in itself, it's also not an acceptable term because the word challenge, um, in a way, put the burden on the person. But like I said in the beginning, that people with disability are so disabled because of the barrier that the society have placed. And when these barriers are taken off, the disability would no longer matter. Perhaps we could discuss some of these barriers later in this conversation. But then when you say people, you are talking about persons with disabilities in general and you talk about physically challenged, how about those whose disability are not physical? So in the strict sense, it means that you're excluding those persons. So when I say persons with physical disability, I'm talking about those whose disability you can see on the surface, like persons on wheelchair, persons using crutches, and all other disabilities that are visible to sight. So there are terms that are being used in the past to refer to these people. And like I said, even for the deaf, you find these terms even in the Holy Scriptures. You know, at some point I feel like perhaps we need to write another version of the Bible that will use terms that may be generally accepted to everyone. But that's a conversation for another day. So we call people crippled or lame or wheelchair bound. These are some of the terms that are used to refer to persons with physical disability but are not accepted as terms to address persons with disabilities. Just like I described for the deaf and dumb, We all know that a lame person also connotes an unintelligent person. And we also know that to cripple something also has other negative effects or meanings. Again, the usage has become archaic, and since it has the potential of giving a negative meaning when associated with a human, it is felt that it's not proper to refer to persons with physical disabilities as crippled or as lame. A way to do that, or a better way to address them, is to call them persons with physical disabilities or persons who uses wheelchair or users of wheelchair. And that takes us to wheelchair bound. When you are bound to something, it creates limitation. Users of wheelchair, like the name goes, users, they use the wheelchair to aid their mobility, but they are not bound by it. So it is not a test of their ability or a testament to what they can do or do without. There is no doubt that the wheelchair plays an important role in the life of the user, but they are not bound to it, hence, they are not referred to as wheelchair bound. Another category of persons with disabilities, and perhaps this is one category that has a lot of demeaning terms, are persons with psychosocial disability, or those commonly called those with mental health condition. There are lots of uh, terminologies that are used, right? And if the mic is opened for people to say how they could describe these people or what term they have heard, you hear different terms of unacceptable ways and funny ways that you have referred to them. You call them mad people or lunatics or Kolo, and a lot of other terms. Like, we all know these terms that we generally use when we see people. And also, it puts people inside one general basket. We know that there are degrees to psychosocial disability, and while some are on the extreme, which is in a very small percentage, a large number of persons with disabilities are not, or persons with psychosocial disabilities are not. But we still have such archaic and unacceptable terms, even in our laws and in formal communications. We refer to them as persons with psychosocial disability and sometimes as persons with mental health condition, which is a more acceptable term. We often see other children with intellectual disability or developmental disability, those with Down syndrome or autism, or children with cerebral palsy, and even adults as alike. And people call imbecile. I cannot even remember all the terms that they use to qualify people in this category, which are demeaning and an undignified way of referring to children or adults with those disabilities. So generally, the use of language in referring to persons with disabilities have a lot to do with the perception that the society have of the people with that particular disability. And so it is important that when we discuss disability or persons with disabilities, that we are also aware and try to know about the right terminologies to use in order not to unknowingly continue the culture of stigma or promote all of those stereotypes that have been associated with persons with disabilities over time. As said, we'll talk about communicating with persons with disabilities or gadgets or technology that help persons with disabilities to work well. And these also differ depending on the type of disability. For the blind read through braille and also text to speech softwares and devices. With modern technology, we have screen readers that we use on the phone, on the computer, which help the blind to be able to read and communicate. The white cane, which is the guide cane that you see blind persons hold, is also expected to aid their movement. As they tap with the cane and navigate, it gives them a sense of where they are and whether there is an obstacle ahead. There are several other technology that have evolved that help the blind operate and work well, like the braille embosser or the braille display. We have the talking calculator, we have the braille watch, the talking watch, and different other things used by the blind. A lot of these are text to speech or braille devices in general. I've mentioned earlier that the deaf use sign language. And sign language is one of the many languages that God has given us on earth. I personally think that we should all learn sign language as much as possible because, again, it aids communication. The deaf will tell you that the same way you feel lost when you go into a community that speaks a language that you don't understand is the same way the deaf feels when there is a communication or an information that's not accessible. So when you see videos like in this era of social media, videos being posted online and people talk about different things in audio formats and there are no closed captioning or sign language interpretation, shows that a segment of the society is excluded from benefiting from that communication. So it's important that we always take care to try to ensure that closed captioning is discussions happen in a space because the deaf can also join and they can also participate. And talking about postings and all, there's a lot of conversation going on around image descriptions for the blind and those who use screen readers. This is because when you also post information using pictures or text that are images, those who are blind, for example, will not be able to read those because they are not plain text. So it's important that those text of those documents are provided and where there are photos that the photo is described and that will aid everyone to be able to understand and read. There are also other gadgets that the deaf use, like the video relay and some speech to text softwares and device. Remember, for the blind, I talked about text to speech, but for the deaf, it's speech to text, because that will also bring out those things in writing for them to see. But beyond sign language and speech to text, we also have a disability that is a combination of the blind and the deaf, and we refer to them as the deaf blind. And the deaf blind communicate via tactile communication. Some people would say tactile sign language. So it's a use of different gesture, touching the hands, touching the body, the back, and different parts to communicate a lot of information. So there are those who are actually deaf blind. Sometimes one of the disability, either the deafness or the blindness, is more pronounced than the other, and there are people that have them all in their fullness. Well, these are also members of the society and should not be excluded. And so we have the tactile communication to enhance communication between the deaf-blind and every other person. We know about the wheelchair, we know about the crutches that people with physical disability use, but then we also know how inaccessible the environment is. Many people with wheelchair find it difficult to move around or enjoy daily life because they have to be careful where they go to, as many spaces are inaccessible for the wheelchair to pass. So we need the ramps and the wide doors and the accessible toilets and all of that. We need a lot of light and appropriate lighting for those who have low vision and persons with albinism. Um, so one thing we did not talk about patients is how many minutes I have to talk, because again this conversation can go on and on and on. But again, I want to assume that this is supposed to be a 1 hour discussion between 8 and 9, and people may still have to comment. So I would as well try to just wrap up, and perhaps we could engage further to discuss some of these things. But generally, of all that I have said is that persons with disabilities are members of the society that deserve to live their lives in dignity. And the use of language is capable of perpetrating a lot of discrimination and stigma and promoting stereotypes and misconceptions if not properly used. Why it is difficult to want to memorize all the terms and all those things to use, sometimes the right thing to do where the opportunity arises is to ask. And talking about asking and support to persons with disabilities, let me also add that when you want to help a person with disability, one of the right thing to do is to ask them how they would like to be helped and how they are most comfortable with. Sorry, patients, can you hear me? Because I'm getting notification that there's a connection issue.
Yes, I can hear you clearly, sir.
Okay, good to know that I can still be heard. So, you do not put persons with disabilities in one basket. So, because you see two persons who are deaf, you assume that their needs are the same. sometimes their needs may differ. Some people communicate well via sign language, but there are others who have not even learned sign language at all or very well and would rather communicate via captioning or text. Some blind persons will prefer soft copies of things, like you provide for them in soft copies or in audio formats, while others work well with Braille. So there are different accommodation needs that everyone with disability has. Disability affects people in different ways, and it's very important that we ask the best way to be of support before we or before they glitch. And all I was saying is that it's important to talk with people and know the type of help or the type of support or accommodation that they need, and that will help us uh, achieve maximum participation in our programs, in our conversations, or be able to provide optimum support to our friends, to our family members, or even to strangers whom we want to be of help to. To be good that we always have that conversation. I remember a funny thing that someone shared, and as a blind person on the road, someone was trying to help him, and because he was holding a white cane, when this person comes, I want to help show him the way. Instead of holding him by the hands or allowing him, the blind person, to hold the helper, this person just held the tip of the cane and then was moving ahead, and that was following. Like, instead of making it come to him like a help, he felt like it's either this person doesn't want to come close or finds him disgusting. Otherwise, you just hold the cane and there's a distance between you and the person you are leading, and he has to tell him, please, can you just leave my cane, because it makes him uncomfortable to walk without the cane, especially with the cane being the control of another person entirely. So it's very important that we know how best to support and how best to be of help, and that would help us a lot. I think I would stop here. I'll be able to answer questions if there are any, and take comments and contributions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience did same. Once again, sorry for the technical glitch. Sometimes we experience this in life. So our speaker has said a lot about the types of disabilities, how to communicate with them, how to approach them, how to the right terms to use, and what not to use. So if we have questions, since we don't have much time, if we have questions, please kindly send in a request. I'm seeing Louise Vivian sending in a request. Victor, please kindly accept her. I've been trying to approve a request, but I don't know what the problem is from my own end.
I'm not even seeing the request here. Can you
Please,
hear me?
okay. Louise Vivian, please can you send it again? I actually saw your request, but I've been trying to approve. I don't know what the problem is. I'm still trying to approve it, but it's not working.
Yeah, I think she's on now.
Okay, okay.
don't know.
Okay, please, the floor is yours. Hello, Liz Vivian. Please unmute your mic and speak to us. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
yes, we can hear you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So, I thank the host and the speaker for this section. It is very, very educating. Personally, I learned a lot of things. I learned not to put all the disabilities in one basket. And if I want to help, I should ask how they want to be helped. It's very, very important. I learned this and I will not forget this in a hurry. But I have one question. Like back in the school, while we were studying special education, we were taught about calling all of them special target people. So I want to ask the speaker, is it okay to call people with disabilities special people, or should we call them with all the names he taught us? Thank you very much. That's all. That's my question.
Okay, thank you for your question. Mr. Theophilus, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vivian. When you say special target people, in my mind, I'm like, this one a new one. Oh." Because again, I know that special education, there's this kind of a disagreement between how they refer to persons with disabilities and how they are being referred to in the human rights world. Um, you have special needs students, special needs education, and all of that, and even the name of the type of education has that word special in it. So I wouldn't say it is not acceptable, but I think it's the context, because the word special, like I said initially, that persons with disabilities want to be seen as normal members of the society. Now the word special is already creating a strata. It's already showing that there is something different. And so it's from that prism that we often say just call them persons with disabilities. But I know that in special education, we still call special needs people, we have special needs education, and um, the use of that terminology, well, I think the argument is still on. So, yes, because you are an educationist, if you refer to people as special needs education or special needs persons, I would understand, and I'm sure a lot of people will understand. But also know that once in a while you are going to get that kickback that people will tell you are not special need people, we are persons with disabilities. But like I said, it's just a matter of context. So I know I've not given you a yes or no answer, but that's just what it is at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your response, sir. Mr. Timothy, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Um, just to say a quick thank you to Mr. Theophilus for this eye-opening section. It was really a learning call for all of us on the call tonight. And of course, you're the best person to address issues like this. Yeah, because like we call you, you're a prof and always a prof. So, just to quickly ask just a question. Um, how do you address people that I don't want to use the word deaf. I don't know if that is proper because even while you were talking, you kept mentioning blind, deaf, and this and that. So I was I was trying to check if it is allowed within your community to do such. But for us, maybe we should address you guys in a different term or in a better terminology. I don't know if that is how it works, but somebody who is deaf, can you say hard in hearing, or somebody who is blind, can you say he has a visual impairment, or is visually impaired? I don't know which is appropriate. I think I joined a bit late, so I missed the first part of your presentation. So
Okay.
sorry if I'm taking you back.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. So for the deaf, the deaf would rather you refer to them as the deaf or deaf persons. A lot of the time, they frown at being referred to as persons with hearing impairment. They would rather you refer to them as deaf. Hard of hearing is also being accepted. But you see, some for someone who is deaf and does not hear any sound, referring to them as hard of hearing might not really capture the the situation. Then they would rather have hard of hearing for those who have some who can hear some sounds, or even with the use of hearing aids. But the word deaf, referring to the deaf, is accepted, and that is how they
Okay.
would rather be called. And same goes for the blind. Yes, you hear people talk about blind persons or persons who are visually impaired. Um, Either of those, I think, would be accepted. Um, but then none of them is considered derogatory. Sometimes a lot of this term come because people are trying to use um, some euphemism to make the condition look lighter. And
Mm,
for persons with disability, we often feel like I can mention that sometimes that disability is not in itself a negative thing. So, and I think the English language was properly or carefully done in such a way that you could see that disability itself is not negative. So, disability, disabled, when they say disability is not inability or something, like if I ask what's the opposite of ability, the opposite of ability is actually inability,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
but the opposite of ability is not disability.
Yeah.
So the same thing goes for even the term disabled, for example. The opposite of able is unable, and it is not disabled. So
Exactly.
to get the opposite of disability or disabled, like you can say persons without disability, that gives you the opposite. So to tell you that the term disability in itself is not negative. And so sometimes in trying to, because of how people perceive this, we come up with a lot of those ways of classification that people feel like, no, this further cause a lot of confusion or would further cause a lot of stigma and all. But directly to your question, yes, deaf, blind, those are acceptable terms. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the response. Mercy, the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Mr. Theophilus, thank you so much for the educative session. I just have a few questions that I would like to ask you.
For persons with disabilities, maybe some of them is, I don't know, I should ask you to tell me, maybe due to lack of knowledge or lack of proper information. For some persons, when you still refer to them as persons with disabilities, they will go further to tell you that they are not persons with disabilities. So the first question is, when you come across such a thing, what do you do? Then my second question is that if you want to use the Washington group of questions to be able to identify persons with disabilities, you understand that you are going to capture both persons with disabilities and non-persons with disabilities. So how do you easily identify a person with disability in terms of data collection? We want to collect data. So thank you very much. That's my question.
Okay, thank you so much, Mercy. Talking about persons with disabilities, telling you that they are not persons with disabilities and all of that. That is a reflection of the society. Like I said, disability in itself comes with a lot of stigma, with a lot of discrimination, and people sometimes want to run away from that. So I did a field work in Lesotho in 2018. In 2018, that's a small country close to South Africa, and it was on persons with albinism. Majority of the persons with albinism in Lesotho would not want to be called persons with disability. And when you try to ask them why, they'll tell you that because when you call them persons with disabilities, it limits them. People will begin to look down on them and all of that. So when people shy away from this is, yes, a factor of how well they understand this concept, and also a reflection of the society. People want opportunity. People want to be seen in different light and feel like, since there's all of this stigma, all of these issues with persons with disabilities, then it is better that we don't get associated with them. And another is also religion. You know that there is this thing that they tell you that when you say something with your mouth, you confess, when you profess and all of that, it becomes your reality. And people will tell you that no, I'm not a person with disability. And I have a friend, his name was Justice of blessed memory. He's late now. He's a blind person. But if you tell him he's a blind person, he will tell you no, that he's not a blind person. And that is because he has the faith that he was going to see one day. And one day I told him, Justice, if you say you are not a blind person, and then you are praying that God should restore your sight, are you not lying to yourself or lying to God? Because already you say you are not a blind person. So why are you praying for sight? And I said, if I say I am a blind person, and I say, God, look, oh, I am a blind person, restore my sight. And you go and say, God, I'm not a blind person, restore me. Who will God listen to? So the religion and the way we are taught to have faith sometimes also affect what people think and how people perceive a lot of these things. So generally, just the society and a matter of understanding. And talking about collection of data, the Washington Group question is a set of questions that have been developed to help capture disability when collecting data, the type of questions to ask. Because when you ask people, just like you say, are you a person with disability? Some people will tell you no. When you ask them, do you have difficulty seeing even if you are using glasses? Because you did not ask, are you a person with disability? They will tell you yes. But by virtue of that, you are a person with disability. So it's just putting it differently without necessarily using the term disability to make people really assess their interaction with the society and see what they can do easily or what they can do with difficulty. So when you want to collect data, um, the Washington group question is actually wide and have questions for different type of data collection, whether for children, whether for women, or for all those classification. It's advisable that yes, you use it, but try to be as broad in your questioning as possible to enable people able to identify their disability, if any, at the end of the day. So um, it's a set of questions that is being reviewed here and there as people interact with it and as difficulties come. Like I said, it has its own limitations, which is beyond our conversation here at the moment, but it still remains a standard way of collecting disability data or disaggregating data by disability. I hope that answers your question, Mercy.
And yes, thank you very much. So the part I was looking at was that if you want to collect data of persons with disabilities and you are using the Washington group of questions, you see that you are going to even count non-persons with disabilities, because for some persons, when you begin to ask them questions like this, they just feel that there is an intervention coming and they just have to say yes. But then
in
you
this
can't
era
tell
of
people
palliatives.
you can't really tell people what to say and what not to say, so it becomes difficult for someone like me. So that's why I was asking.
I get you. But then, like I said, it's still a reflection of our society, right? Because right
Okay.
now we all want palliative as subsidies dealing with us. So you see, I understand that, but people, it's all about laying a background and trying to tell people to be honest. But truly, yes, you can't tell people what to say, but that's also beyond us. Over to you, Patience.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Thanks to everyone who has spoken. Um, Thank you so much, Mr. Theophilus, for honoring the invitation, and thank you for doing justice to this topic. And I'm glad a lot of the listeners who turned out to be speakers admitted that they learned a lot. So thank you so much for joining, to all of you. We'll meet again next month towards the end of the month. And remember, this recording will be available on our handle. I'm seeing a request, Assad. Please try to make it very brief as we are behind time. Vic, please can you help me accept?
I've been
Okay, it's a
accepted.
speaker.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay, good evening.
I just do not want to miss this opportunity to say a very big thank you to Barrister Theophilus. I just love the way he treated the topic and attended to all the questions raised. One will be wondering, is he a barrister in the disability area or a barrister of law? Thank you, Barrister.
Thanks, Asel. Thank you so much.
It's actually been a while I heard someone refer to you as barrister.
Avi, it's like this barrister thing.
Thank you so much to our wonderful speaker once again. And thank you to all our amazing audience. You guys made our night. So, just like I was saying, the recording will be available on our Twitter handle, and it will also be available on YouTube. That's Saidi TV by next week, early next week. So thank you and see you next week. Have a wonderful night rest. Bye.